Fruits Basket was a manga series originally written by Natsuki Takaya, who, yes, she is also responsible for the spin-off Fruits Basket series that you can find at your local bookstore in the manga section. Otherwise, she wrote other obscure manga that you may or may not have heard of. If I can find these series, I totally read them. Fruits Basket is one of the top manga to read in both Japan and the United States. In Japan, it sold more than 18 million copies as of current. The series was so popular for its romantic fantasy story that in 2001, in July, a 26-episode anime premiered and lasted until December of that same year. However, the anime only covered half of its series, due to Fruits Basket being one of the unfortunate manga series to be stuck in the trap of airing while the manga wasn't even done yet era of anime showings. Though the anime received a ton of praise and great reception in 2002, with critics falling in love with the character development, they also say that the plot of the story seriously lacked development, and it did have to do with the fact that the anime only tackled such a small portion of the series. Even Takaya herself was known to dislike the anime adaptation due to the creativity changes the studio decided to make.
Normally I don't interrupt during the background portion of these types of videos, but yikes! This is like my first time ever hearing that a mangaka actually had negative opinions about the anime adaptation to their work. It's like saying if you heard that J.K. Rowling actually hated the live-action movie adaptations of her Harry Potter series. You would be just as shocked.
In 2005, with no second season of the show in sight, Funimation Entertainment of all studios, as a petition, had volunteer fans create 1,000 origami cranes and send them to Studio Dean, the studio responsible for the original anime, as a plea. In Japanese folklore, the 1,000 origami cranes resembles a possible granted wish if someone were to make them. Sadly, a season 2 of this anime would never be produced or even made by Studio Dean ever. However, something better did occur. In April of 2019, TMS Entertainment would release a 25-episode remake of the 2001 anime, but it would stick to the original manga in full, which ended its run 13 years prior in 2006. The anime was welcomed by anime and manga fans with rapturous praise, possibly bigger than what happened in 2001. But the biggest part of the hype for this show was that the studio announced that they would cover the entire manga series from the first chapter to the epilogue. We don't know how many seasons exactly are going to be made, but we do know that a season 2 of the remake will premiere this spring in 2020, keeping the promise of making the series much longer than its 2001 ancestor.
Now I bet some of you are saying, but Kate, is it unfair to make a versus video of basically an anime that's, well, not even done yet? And to which I'd say, yes, it is unfair. However, for what I'm discussing here today, the 2001 version of the anime is technically incomplete, or technically not the entire thing, because they only discussed half of the entire manga series at the time. And the only equivalent that matches the 2001 anime is the first season of Fruits Basket, the 2019 version. So I find that fair, it's fair, because they mainly reached the same exact point anyway, and that season 2 is coming out this spring. However, for each version of whatever version that you guys watched, or if you watched both, or if you like one over the other, the two of them still have very unique elements to discuss. So without further ado, I'm wearing my favorite Fruits Basket sweater, and I'm basically ready to review one of my favorite series of all time. No joke, this was like the first manga I've ever finished in my entire life, because my high school library basically had the entire series in stock, and I think I read the whole entire thing within like 1 or 2 months. So with that said, this is Versus between Fruits Basket 2001 and Fruits Basket 2019. Now, I actually did watch both versions of Fruits Basket in 2019 back to back because I wanted to make sure that I could grasp every single detail that I could get if I remember both versions by, well, watching them recently, or basically doing that really helped, because I have a lot of opinions about it. First off being that there are differences between the shows, and the one primary difference is basically the music that comes out of it.
The original singer of the opening and ending to the 2001 show is the renowned Ritsuko Okazaki, and I just love her voice. It's beautiful and perfect for this show's atmosphere.
とても嬉しかったよ君が笑いかけてた楽しい湯気さあ囲みましょう
If you don't recognize her here, you may recognize her in other places.
眩しい光木々のつゆ生まれる
Unfortunately, Okazaki passed away from stomach cancer in 2004 at the too young age of 44. Now, I know what you're thinking. Cait, Say I Love You came out in 2012, and you said she did the opening for that. Well, she technically did. A Michael Jackson sort of happened, I guess. I really don't have an accurate response. Anyway, the point is that Okazaki's voice gave the 2001 anime a very calming and relaxing atmosphere for the show despite its plot elements. To be fair, shoujos were mostly like this at the time. Well, this or the most peppy childlike mess you've ever heard in your life. The early 2000s were still the 90s in Japan. At least that's how it seemed.
Also, back in the early 2000s, what was really popular was that if a show was going to be dubbed in English, the music also had to be dubbed in English.
I was so happy when you smiled. Your smile breaks through the clouds of gray. Far from the sunny days that lie in sleep.
I actually don't mind this version. It still reflects the original Japanese opening, keeping its calmness and sweetness. The ending...
Now let's talk together, enjoying the company we share.
I don't hate it. It's just that the English lyrics kinda ruin the atmosphere of it all. The words don't really flow as well. Is that weird for me to say that Japanese works better with this instrumental than the English does? Or am I looking into this way too much?
So it couldn't exactly be possible to hold a candle to the original music when basically the remake comes out, right?
Oh, please, 誰より近くに君さえいれば強くなれたよ My heart
That song by Beverly had me by the very first note. Very rarely does a song ever do that for me. And for those of you who basically don't know who Beverly is,
この道の先に続くハーモニー
also for you video game nerds out there,
燃えてゆける明日の dreaming あの日誓った言葉
I mean, yeah, the game is actually only a Japanese release, but hey, the opening's still valid.
Going back to this opening, however, Beverly is the only singer who I can think of for J-pop that makes a Fruits Basket opening like this one work. I've seen so many arguments about which show had the better openings, but I will say this. I don't think this opening was meant to compete with the original, but to honor and complement the original. I believe that the song again shares the same spirit as For Fruits Basket did. They both set the tone for the series without exactly spoiling what's going to happen in it or accidentally misleading the audience. While Okazaki was more subtle, Beverly put a lot of emotion into her song, and that's okay. It doesn't make the remake version better or the original version worse. It would be like trying to compare apples to oranges. You just can't do it.
The ending, on the other hand,
as much as I shouldn't compare, I would rather listen to this song than the original ending. First of all, it's 2019, so ending songs deserved a major upgrade from the early 2000s fare. As much as I like the original song, it's not something I'd listen to on repeat, unlike Lucky Ending.
So unlike the 2001 anime, since this is the 2010s we're talking about here, and the series also had more than 12 to 13 episodes, obviously, this show actually had 2 openings and 2 endings, one pair for the first half, and another pair for the second half. So this is going to be different since I'm also going to discuss the second opening and the second ending to the 2019 show. So how about that second half, huh?
泣かないでその気持ち受け止められないから
Oh dear.
I'm just gonna play it straight. I never liked Chime as the show's second opening. I mean, I like how it starts. It sounds like it's gonna be something fun, which is what the show could also need. But every portion after that sounds like every other anime shoujo opening I've heard this past decade. In fact, I can show you a better anime opening that sounds similarly like this, but from a worser show. I'm dead serious. Every single time I look through the comments of this opening on this platform, everyone says the same thing about the show being another bland made from a game women are too sexualized anime with a badass opening as a misconception of actual quality. Don't believe me? Look at the score right here. Yeah, that's not a pretty number as much as you want it to be. However, it still has a better opening than most anime that came out of this decade. And that's pretty much an insult for another anime that came out the same year as this, which basically won almost every single Crunchyroll award by default. Even 3 years later, I binged to this song like it's the Evangelion or the English first season of the Pokemon theme. Sadly, Chime is not one of those songs, and I'm kind of disappointed in that. But what about the second ending? It couldn't be as lackluster, right?
君は今何を考えてる Say the truth
Oh, who am I kidding? This song is also great and very fitting for the show. One Step Closer could arguably be better than the first ending to this remake, especially since the title could basically mean one step closer to building that friendship between Toru and the Soma family. It 100% fits, and either that was done on purpose or by accident.
So critiquing this portion of the review is actually a little more difficult, but I'm still going to have to go with the remake because if I'm doing the math correctly, for the original show, I only liked the one opening, while for the remake, I only loved 3 out of the 4 songs that came out of the openings and endings. So, again, with the math, 75% still beats 50%, so there you go. The animation to both of these shows is like night and day considering they came from 2 entirely different decades. So, yes, it's really unfair, but at the same time, we still gotta talk about it.
The 2001 anime clearly and obviously matches the manga's original art, yet its evolving in cleanness as the 2000s would be remembered by years later, especially since just escaping the clutches of the 90s. Despite its age, I still love this art. I don't think it looks old or too out of shape, it's the characteristic of the 2000s. It's ignorant to say that the animation looks blocky because of it. It's like saying that Disney's Snow White looks awful because it's 1930s animation instead of what it should look like in 2013 when Frozen came out. Now come on, that would be the most immature thing I've ever heard. Case in point, 2001 anime's animation 100% fit for the time. And for something that did come out in 2001, the show had its moments. I'm not going to spoil what yet, but there is a scene that still scares the living crap out of me and gives me war flashbacks to this day. And it was all because of how it was animated.
Is that going to stop me from praising the 2019 version's animation to the high heavens? You bet your butt it won't!
Have you looked at this yet? It's beautiful! Look how shiny it is! Look how sleek and relaxing it looks! TMS Entertainment knew exactly what they were doing when they were remaking the show, so for those of you who are complaining that Toru's eyes look too big for a slim head or that their faces don't appear to be right from what the manga's art did in the 90s, just remember that this is the 2010s-2020s update. Leave them alone.
Okay, I kinda sounded very uneducated for the last minute and a half while discussing that, but let me put my 2 cents into this.
The 2019 update is beautiful, not only because it's required for almost every shoujo anime of this decade to look the way it's supposed to, but in my personal opinion, when I think of a realistic fiction anime with a fantasy backbone, I expect the show to be magical, since the show is about a girl who ends up stumbling upon a family secret because she tried to stop one of them from beating the living crap out of her classmate. The 2001 anime for the time might have done the job it was supposed to, but the 2019 remake has more magical elements. Whether it's an animation budgeting thing or a special effects thing, I'm not sure about. But the 2019 anime definitely has a lot more special animation added into it than the 2001 show does, which reminds me of what Fruits Basket is actually about. It's not a comedy about a family of boys, almost but not really, potentially fighting over one high school girl like how the original anime made it seem. It's about a girl coming into a family where its members have little to no self-esteem because they were taught that their curse is something to be ashamed of rather than something to embrace like Toru does. As an animation project, it still has to reflect those moments, whether it's meant to make you cry or cheer you up. Fruits Basket 2019 did that exceptionally well. So did the 2001 show, but if I had to pick based on how it made me react, well, I already said it.
Sorry, Fruits Basket 01, but Fruits Basket 19 seems to have the better luck these past 2 rounds.
Now, as far as both of these categories go, since both of these shows are following the same story, you would think that they'd be the same no matter what you watch, right? Well, you wouldn't be wrong exactly, since the story starts the same in both shows, so obviously how the characters act and the story routes would be incredibly similar and close to the manga as possible. However, this would actually be the biggest difference between the original anime and its remake. Remember, the 2001 anime only had half of the unfinished series to deal with as far as content, so if Studio Dean really wanted to make this opening have a good closing, it had to cut a lot of the foreshadowing out, or else the final outcome, which would be episode 26, would not make any sense to any person who didn't read the manga first. Unfortunately, this would mean it would cut a bunch of emotional bits of why Fruits Basket the manga was so great, and that it made the plot so much more convoluted. In fact, it's safe to say that the first version of the show left the audience with a lot more questions rather than answers. Why is Akito such a manipulative little bitch? Why does Kyo seem to have some sort of connection with Toru's dead mother? What happened to the best friends' backstories? I thought there were more Soma family members than this. The Zodiac is not even finished yet.
As I stated earlier, the 2001 version of the show was basically working off an unfinished manga series. And this was basically common practice back in the, 90s and the 2000s era. So basically what Japan was doing with the manga in regards to creating anime from it is that the anime was basically advertisements for people to read the manga, which is clever on paper, but if you're taking a really clever story from obviously a hallmark manga such as Fruits Basket, and I'm not sure how true that was back in the 2000s since it was still being worked on, but I would say it would probably be the shoujo same league as, dare I say, Full Metal Alchemist or Naruto or Dragon Ball or something among those lines. So I think people would have been better off writing basically a fan fiction or working on poorly animated shorts that they would later post on YouTube or whatever platform that was existed at the time, rather than taking half of a very clever story and kind of, well, treating it as like a passion project or a vanity project of some sort. 26 episodes of basically manga advertising really does not do Fruits Basket justice. But before I get to that, I really want to talk about the voice actors for the anime, and yes, this will be extremely important.
For the Japanese dub in between the two shows, the voice actors are entirely different casts altogether, but since I watched the English dub for both shows, I wanted to point out something very interesting. They kept most of the same voice actors for both shows. I almost had a feeling that the show stole some of the 2001 anime's dialogue just so they can fill in the 2019's lip sync, but it didn't take me until later to find out that even the script for the 2019 show had been rewritten as well. That's probably for the best. Translations have greatly improved since a decade ago, or even more than that. Laura Bailey as Toru was perfect because she portrayed the down-to-earth, innocent, and somewhat naive nature of the girl whose mother had just died. Yuki is voiced by Eric Vale, who you might know as Shigaraki from My Hero Academia and Loki from Fairy Tail. I honestly did not see this connection until I was working on the script for this video, I swear.
By the way, did you know that this guy actually wrote the English script to the first episode of Baccano and then other scripts for Dragon Ball? That's pretty dope if you're asking me.
Anyway, when I first watched the 2001 anime, I was constantly questioning why Yuki sounded super emotionless as he spoke, but then it hit me. Yuki was supposed to be the cool, emotionless type considering what he's been through, so I was basically used to it a quarter into the first series anyway. Speaking of My Hero Aka, Jerry Jewell as Kyo almost gave me Bakugo vibes. I'm not kidding, I mistook this guy for Clifford Chapin by mistake while watching the 2019 show. Is it just me, or do they sound the same?
We're finished! Done! This sucks! Real men battle with their fists! Die! 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 I'm always calm and rational, you red-haired loser!
And I could have sworn I pronounced that guy's last name wrong. John Bergmeyer as Shigure. I cannot think of a better voice. He's supposed to be the quiet, calm, and collective Soma who sometimes you have no idea what he's thinking, and that is exactly the vibe I get from this voice. Toru's psychic friend Saki has a different voice actress in the new show from the old one, but I almost didn't notice this because Jad Saxton did an excellent job of adapting Daphne Gear's voice. Arisa also got a voice actress change, but I thought Elizabeth Maxwell did a great job honoring Parisa Fakri's work as well. Now, I'm not going to name every single Soma on here because some of them were changed, but I don't exactly have an opinion if that does anything. Oh, except for Momiji, where Kimberly Grant gave him a straight-up American voice while Michaela Krantz, a voice actress from Minnesota, mind you, straight up gives Momiji a kinda accurate yet kinda weird German accent, which I was not expecting at all.
Sida, weg ein Glück! What language is that? Schön, dich kennen zu lernen. I'm sorry, but I don't understand.
However, the biggest change, and possibly a spoiler I have to note, is Akito Soma.
Alright, with this character right here, I'm actually going to fall into spoiler territory for those of you who have not finished the manga. And basically, season 2 is coming out this spring, so obviously we can't watch that until April. So, if you guys really don't want to be spoiled, make sure you go to this time slot right here, so you can basically skip all of that. And if you guys do want to spoil yourselves at this moment, don't say I didn't warn you.
In the 2001 anime, the biggest complaint I've seen from people about Akito for the English dub is this. Why did you cast this character as a man? Are you kidding me right now? Well, to be fair, this show was also in production before that plot point was even addressed in the manga, so at the time it made sense that Akito was casted by a man because that's how the family addressed Akito as. However, if you went deeper into the manga, towards the end of it actually, you come to find out that in order for Akito to be the head of the family, his mother forced him to portray herself as a male. Yup, Akito is actually a woman. I am not making this up. Her mother was so abusive, and one of her ways of torturing her daughter was to raise her as a boy because Akito would be greater respected that way, apparently. Look, when you have a character who literally tortures her child in every way possible, her logic doesn't make any sense anymore.
Knowing this fact, unfortunately, it makes the 2001 show a lot more awkward, and it really outdates it exponentially. But thank goodness that the 2019 show immediately fixed this.
Akito in the remake is portrayed by Trina Nishimura, which gives Akito a more grown-up woman voice, which makes sense because I think Akito is supposed to be an adult. Oh, well, never mind, but at least we got a woman voice this time. You can stop ranting now. But it would be very unfair of me to criticize Akito in the 2001 show solely because the character was portrayed by a dude because of the resources and where the original staff thought the show was going at the time. Yes, it does make Akito more outdated and inaccurate, with the second half now complete. But for the time in mind, I thought this was fine.
Speaking of, there were elements that either had to be cut out because, well, basically the creators had no idea, or they basically had to throw in fillers anyway.
Let's compare things added and missed from each of the shows. For example, in the 2001 show, when Kyo has his first day at Toru's school in episode 3, when all the girls are crowding around him, he just parkours his way to the nearest window and runs off like the antisocial butterfly he was. In the 2019 show, the same thing happens, but in episode 2. But also this time, one of his new classmates is about to touch him, which makes Kyo freak out because... Duh. So he accidentally martial arts his classmate to the ground. This adds more character to Kyo because this is how he reacts to almost getting his secret blown despite him just hurting a girl in front of his entire classroom. Again, by accident. Then that gives him more of a reason to jump out of the classroom window and run away. In those same episodes respectively, they even play the Kyo apology scene differently. In the 2001 anime, when Toru describes why she hit Kyo in the face by accident, she explains it like the little bean she is with the smile that she always gives, calling him a pervert in the process, to which Kyo is a little annoyed and awkward by that statement. But in the 2019 anime, Toru is extremely apologetic, which is more characteristic to the fear that Toru made Kyo angry because of what she did to him when they first met. When she describes how she thought Kyo might have been a stalking pervert, Kyo seems more disgusted and shocked by the thought of it, proving once and for all this character was and never will be an accidental pervert. You're welcome, internet.
Though these details are smaller in perspective, sometimes it's the smallest things that can make the biggest changes in the long run. As for the 2001 anime, it was obviously made for a more comedic tone because that's what the show was going for, and that was what the original manga was kind of aiming for, and we had no idea it was going to get dramatic. So with the 2019 show, it obviously had more drama elements because obviously it's going to get more dramatic anyway. Of course, that's what we know now. Either way, the scenes were not ruined for me whatsoever. But for the 2019 show, it definitely gives a lot more perspective on what the director wanted to do, considering what the end goal was going to be.
Now to the more obvious examples, and no, I'm not going to explain all of them in this video or else it will take forever. Everyone remembers the episode where we are introduced to Momiji, in my personal opinion, the best Soma in the entire series. He's literally Honey Senpai before Honey Senpai was a thing. Except he's half German. Something about German boys makes them really adorable in anime, and I don't know what that is. However, in the 2019 anime, we're actually introduced to Momiji in the episode before we're officially acquainted. But this kind of makes sense foreshadowing-wise, since we'll find out later that Momiji is actually the son of the man who owns the building that Toru works at as a janitor. If you haven't heard, read, or watched the original anime to the series before, you never would have seen this hint coming in episode 15. Then I want to mention the Valentine's Day episode. In the 2001 anime, it plays up the element where everyone is trying to make Kyo eat Kagura's and Toru's chocolates just to make them both feel better, though he hates the holiday so much. But in the 2019 show, they decide for the girls and Kyo and Yuki to go on a double date instead, which honestly was a more interesting filler episode rather than watching Kyo get tortured for an entire episode. Then there's the filler episode in 2001 where Yuki's brother, Ayame, tricks Yuki and Toru to visit his costume shop, and I'm using that term very loosely. And thank mother-loving Christ that this was not in the 2019 series, or else I would have flipped. Let's just say that I thought this episode was very close to ecchi pandering, that it pissed me off while watching it.
And for this last example, I'm afraid it's also another spoiler. So again, if you really don't want to be spoiled because of the reasons I mentioned earlier, please go to this time slot right here. And again, this is a warning.
The biggest change I have to make the connection for in a video such as for Fruits Basket of all things is the most obvious scene that any Fruits Basket fan would point out. The 24th episode of the Fruits Basket 2001 anime, and the last episode of the Fruits Basket 2019 Season 1 anime, Kyo's true form. It won't be a Fruits Basket discussion video or review if I don't mention this in particular. This was the scene that either made you cry or gave you nightmares for days. For those of you who went into this series for the first time, especially the 2001 anime, no one saw the scene coming. Heck, in the 2001 anime, this is never mentioned until episode 24. In the 2019 show, this is heavily foreshadowed in episode 4, where we meet Kagura for the first time. When she's upstaging Toru, she accidentally lets the true form term slip and is about to mention it further until...
それ以上無駄口聞いてみろ。容赦しねえぞ。
If that wasn't the voice of death in that moment, I wouldn't know what would be. And for the very obvious reasons, Kyo wants everyone to be tight-lipped about it. However, when it comes to the outcome of Kyo's biggest secret, depending on the version you watch, the endings are the same, but how they get there are extremely different. And they couldn't be any more different than what already exists. The contrast is so great that the apples to oranges comparison would be too small to use as a metaphor. For one thing, the way the scene went down in the 2001 anime uses Kyo's true form as the climax of the series, since this was basically the stopping point for the manga at the time. And boy, did episode 25 really go over the top. How over the top? Well, imagine if you were making yourself a banana split sundae. You have your bananas, then you have your ice cream, your chocolate syrup, so the last thing you gotta put on before the cherry would be the whipped cream. The events go down in this episode was as if you basically smother that sundae in all the whipped cream that was in your can. That was how Kyo's true form arc felt like as I was watching. And just like putting that whipped cream in the bowl, it was way too much unnecessary banter before the important part. How both these scenes play out once the true form transformation happens is the same. Kyo's mentor asks Toru if she still adores Kyo after seeing the cat's true form, and without a word from her mouth, she runs into the forest chasing after Kyo. In the 2001 version, Toru stops in the middle of the forest and starts puking her guts out while remembering what she just witnessed minutes prior, and for some stupid reason that makes no sense, Akito shows up to try to play with Toru's mind in disappearing from the family's life forever with the new information of Kyo's secret fresh in her mind. Of course, Shigure shows up to stop all of it and convince Toru to keep going. When they find Kyo at the lake, Yuki fights him for a bit, but Toru stops it and almost gets herself killed trying to get Kyo's human soul to come out and listen to her.
Honestly, I thought the episode was kind of problematic the first time I saw it. Why? Well, because Toru showed a side of herself that was kind of the opposite of what Toru's character really was, so it kind of didn't work.
Like, come on! You ever find that one of your best friends used to be a gangbanger and that your other friend has psychic powers, but you suddenly get ill after you see one of your new friends turn into a literal monster in front of your eyes? Now, to be fair, Akito did mention that the true form was ugly and the smell was rancid, so that could be the reason why Toru got sick. But for her to doubt her friendship with Kyo at that moment doesn't make any sense, because after what her mom taught her, Toru doesn't sound like a person to all of a sudden abandon someone who is in desperate need like Kyo. Especially if some jerk-off like Akito was trying to fool her into turning her back away. Yeah, Akito is manipulative, and we saw that before, but we also saw Toru stand up for herself. So for her to go back on that side of her at that moment was a giant step backward that did not make any sense at all. Secondly, the fact that Yuki gets involved kind of proves that Yuki wants to help Kyo because he does care, but it kind of ruins the intimacy that Toru has with Kyo because that's what the end goal is all about. Having Yuki there makes the two characters have equal ground with Kyo, which may have been the point for the 2001 series, but for the manga, it doesn't add up well. This moment was supposed to be Toru's alone, not Yuki's.
So, after my nitpicking, what makes the 2019 version better? Well, it pretty much does the opposite of basically what the other version did.
2019 made this scene a lot more subtle, and it developed Toru as a character much better instead of having the Akito and Yuki nonsense. Toru has a flashback of what her mother said about her giving people a chance, and as scared as Toru was to confront such a beast as Kyo's true form, she knows the only way to get Kyo back is if she confronts him herself. Yes, she also gets herself almost killed in this version, and Yuki's not there to make sure that Toru's safe, but because Toru has to do this on her own, it makes her a stronger heroine in her own right. Even after Kyo tries to push her away, she goes back and fights against the beast, screaming at the top of her lungs for Kyo to hear her. Eventually, this actually works. It's because Toru did this on her own and that they were alone when this was all happening at once that builds Kyo's bond with Toru further. All Kyo wanted was someone to tell him that she wants to be in his life and for him to be in hers. He was sick and tired of hearing I love you because after his own mother saying it 1,000,000 times while also being afraid of Kyo, no other phrase could be so empty to him. Toru does say that she loves Kyo in the moment, and she does admit that she's afraid, something that Kyo's own mother couldn't do. But it's the fact that she will help Kyo through his struggle and accept him for all that he is that turns Kyo back to normal and realize that his final form is nothing to be ashamed of around her. It's this intimacy that builds Kyo as a stronger human being and realizes that Toru is not like all the other girls that he's met who only like him for his looks or is required to love him because of circumstance. Toru chose this path, and Kyo is happy that she was more than willing to do so on her own will. While the 2001 anime does the same thing, the 2019 version obviously had a stronger foundation for what the end goal was and how the story was going to get there. It didn't need any convoluted scenes or extra characters. It needed atmosphere and development, which made it successful.
And it's so beautiful that it makes me cry like the little twerp I am. So, even after all my nitpicking and unnecessarily long explanations, I still think that both of these versions deserve a point in retrospect. The 2001 show did a really good job based on the little material that it had at the time, but the remake version of the show still gets both of the points because, mostly unfairly, it had the entire manga series to go off of because it basically knew how to grow its characters, that they don't make the characters into archetypes, but rather into full-fledged if these people were to exist. I mentioned earlier in this video that Fruits Basket was basically one of my favorite series of all time. And it's still true, but after doing this review and after watching, both of the anime, I think I underestimated myself. Fruits Basket is my favorite series overall. No questions asked about it.
In a review I did in September 2018, I said that Black Butler was one of my favorite anime of all time, and that still rings true. Black Bullet was one of the first anime I've watched that actually brought meaning for me to watch it all the way through. Despite its flaws, it was still enjoyable for me. Fruits Basket did the same for me in high school in manga form when my school's library had the entire series in its manga section. I read the whole series within a month or two, if I remember that correctly. That series got me through basically my worst days, because for the first time in a while, it sucked me into a romantic world that I had been missing for a long time from young adult novels. But then, after watching the remake of the anime, I really apologize to Black Bullet when I say that Fruits Basket is now my new favorite anime just based on the fact that it's doing the manga more justice than the first anime did by default. Now I just gotta go find Kyosoma figurines to add to my collection.
I think I was supposed to talk about something else in this section. Oh yeah, the enjoyability. I think it's needless to say this, but y'all need to watch both of these series because despite one being better than the other, it does not matter.
Both versions have their own charms and flaws, but what they both have in common is that they make room for both comedic and dramatic elements that the original manga was famous for. Momiji's backstory always makes me cry no matter what version I watch or read. Kagura's episode will always and forever make me laugh and feel bad for Kyo at the same time no matter which version. However, the nail on the head will always and forever be this scene. Though I confess that the escalation of the remix version is 50 times more hilarious, and the original Japanese dub's Toru Eep kills me every single time.
But Cait, I'm sure you're going to bag the first series in some way or another. Well, I can't think of any real reason to do that, because it did have its good things that made me really love the show too. It made me laugh, it made me smile, it made me cry, it made me cringe. It made me do a lot of things that even the 2019 show did for me too.
Just remember, the first series was from 2001. It was obviously made for the time, and Studio Dean knew that, which was why I understood why the fans were disappointed when Season 2 didn't come out and why Takia didn't like its version of her manga shown to screen. Still, it got people to watch it, and it was greatly adored by the public when it was originally released, and for pretty good reasons too. I had to switch my brain to 2001 mode in order to watch the show, and by doing that, I found a lot of good things about it. Yeah, there were things I didn't like either, but that comes with everything about shows and movies. You will find things that you like and don't. That's just how it is. However, the very moment I watched the first episode of the 2019 version, I was blown away again, and possibly more blown away than from when I saw the 2001 show.
Why? Well, because TMS Entertainment turned Fruits Basket into something the manga 100% surely was. And that, my friends, is timeless.
It's always been said that when any product for any medium is done right, it will last through the multiple eras of time. Why do you think Shakespeare's plays survived? Why do you think novels like Beowulf or The Odyssey are still remembered? Why are movies like Singin' in the Rain, Jaws, The Terminator, or hell, even the first Star Wars are still considered to be the classics of film? Because there is something about them that resonates with the public at large, and no matter what new generation that comes to watch them, there's something about these products that click in popularity. It could be the story and its morals. It could be the poetry of the words that were written. It could be even the music that comes out of it.
However, my theory of why, series like this last through time so well is because it's relatable to the audience at hand. And not only that, but to every generation of audience. If any character or any storyline can connect to anyone that it has to offer, or what it goes through basically, it's obvious that the person is going to come back and actually rewatch or reread this element. And this is what Fruits Basket actually did for me. I think it's really clear by now that I actually like the 2019 anime more than the original, considering what I've said. But I think at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter.
I've watched a lot of anime and read through a ton of manga since high school. And if there's one thing you should know about me, it's that I'm incredibly picky when it comes to picking up something for a second time. If a story didn't do enough for me to read it or watch it again, despite it being good or something, I consider that product to not have connected or resonated with me much or at all. Fruits Basket is definitely not one of those cases. I read the whole thing within a month, as I said. You would think I would be bored of the story by now. No. When I heard that TMS Entertainment was going to adapt the entire manga into an anime, I had to watch this series twice in order to fulfill my own happiness, and it worked! I understood what Toru was going through, and despite having so much wrong happen to her, she still kept that smile on her face no matter how much she was hurting. I used to do that. Heck, I'm still like that sometimes, but I have friends who keep telling me that I don't have to put up an act if I really want something. It's like what Kyo said to Toru after moving back into her grandfather's house. If you want something, just say it. No one's going to be mad. If they are, they obviously don't care about how you feel or what your needs are. Actually, Kyo reminds me a lot of my best friend from college, Diego. Though he had a tough exterior and I had no idea what he was thinking about sometimes, he obviously cared for me and that he'd be there for me and understand what my needs were. He was not a pushover, but that was the type of person I needed when college was rough for me. In 2017, I did a video of why I wasn't posting as much as I did before. Out of the many that I would be posting, but that's besides the point. And that was because I went through one of the hardest breakups with a boy I thought I could trust. The night it happened, I stormed out of the frat house that Diego and this boy were a part of, and he just happened to come from the other direction with groceries when he saw me in hysterics. He went inside to drop off his things and fetch an umbrella after it started raining, because Florida, and he walked me back to my dorm to make sure I wasn't going to be there by myself. All three of my roommates were out for the night, and I really needed a person there. That was Diego. He even lent me one of his favorite jackets to borrow because I was shivering. I couldn't have asked for a better friend than him to have, especially that night. Even when Diego was having a hard time and didn't want to show it, like Toru, I didn't give up. I promised that I was going to be there no matter what, and that's what our friendship was. So Fruits Basket was more relatable to me than any other anime or American property I had ever seen. They always say that there's going to be that one series or property that sticks with you till the rest of your days because it touched you that much. Needless to say, and I've said it over and over again, for me, that is, and always will be, Fruits Basket, originally written by Natsuki Takaya. Phew! I think this is the longest video I've ever made, so I hope you guys enjoyed this little adventure for the day. If you guys did like it, please make sure you hit the like button down below, and if this series did anything for you in any way, please share those thoughts in the comments as well. If you guys haven't done so already, please subscribe if you want to see more of what I do. It'll be greatly appreciated. Well, I'm Cait Cher, and it's been real. Oyasuminasan!